All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Connectivity Simplified for their Commercial Interior Spaces. I'm Ann Cosgrove, the Editor-in-Chief of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by ConnectTrack. We thank you for joining us. We look forward to a good presentation and some questions and answers at the end. But before we get started, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. First, please note the control panel that is on your screen. This is where you can submit questions in the question box in the panel. We will have a Q&A at the end of the speaker's presentation. So please send your questions in at any time there, type those in, and these will be addressed after the presentation. Also, please note the orange arrow on the left side of that control panel. Clicking on that arrow will either expand or collapse the panel, so please be sure it is expanded so you can access the question box there. Also, if at any time you experience a technical difficulty or have another type of query, you can send a message to us in that question section and someone will respond to you privately. Also, if you're interested in continuing education credits, CEUs, you will receive a certificate of attendance in an email from Facility Executive after this webinar, and you can report that to your association for the continuing education credits. Now I'd like to introduce your speaker today from ConnectTrack. His name is Steve Batchelder. Steve is a passionate person who has devoted 20 years to helping people in the building industry. He is the Director of Sales for ConnectTrack, and he's previously worked in the building industry helping contractors. And as a speaker and trainer, he's spoken to thousands in the industry, and he appreciates that a presentation isn't about reading bullet points. You're going to hear some good work from him today. So he wants to show you some solutions that have worked in the real world with ConnectTrack solutions and connectivity in general. For 5 years, Steve traveled across North America, meeting with facility managers to better understand the issues that you all are facing and to bring those thoughts back to his company's product development team, where they have responded by creating solutions that facility managers and those that they serve need out in the workplace today. So we will, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Steve, and we'll look forward to a Q&A at the end. Hi, Steve. Welcome.
Thanks, Ann. I'm very excited to have this presentation, have everyone here. I'm going to do a couple clicks here so I have everything going for us. Yes, I do again appreciate everyone attending today. I click some of this stuff off from here. There we go. Again, my name is Steve. I've actually been with ConnectTrack for about 7 years, and we have seen what the title of this presentation is, grow like crazy in the last few years. It's optimized connectivity for changing office spaces. We're seeing this happening all over, so we wanted to kind of share a little bit about what we're seeing and maybe what you're experiencing. But again, I'm sorry about some of my technical difficulties here. First of all, I want to give you some basic things that we're going to cover today because I want to respect your time and be right on point about a lot of these issues. So we'll look at them right now. I want to look at what normally you are having to do for power and data placement in open plan offices. I'd like to look at some of the typical issues that these flexible spaces are facing, and we're seeing this all the time. I want to learn how floor-mounted raceways kind of allow this renovation to happen as workspaces are evolving and changing and flexing even on a day-by-day basis. And then we're going to look at several examples of actually high-powered workstations where they have paired raceways with some simple furnishings and have made it work. So the last part of this presentation is really seeing it in action. These things are working, and so we're going to look at some of those. Now, normally I like to show a slide like this and say, does this look familiar to you? Although whenever I'm in front of facility managers, it is. There's always a story about, yeah, we have this space here, here, and here. And so this is what we're addressing today. We see things like this where the cord management is terrible. It's not safe. It shouldn't be in a building. It doesn't meet any codes, but yet we do it because we have to do it. Facility managers are kind of like, you know, the heroes. Hey, I need this done. I need it now. And so you have to do whatever it takes, whether that's gaff tape or some rubber solution or putting carpet over top of a bunch of cables. And so we see this often, and we're going to address this today, and hopefully you'll be able to see that there are several solutions that can help you not have to live this way or your facility live this way anymore. One of the things we see in office spaces today trending is these things that are listed on this slide. It's like this word we hear a lot right now, flexibility. One of the most important attributes, my space needs to be flexible. And I want to talk about that a second. How do we take, as some architects will say, the floor area can be reduced by designing flexible spaces that can be configured for different uses or use one space for multiple functions. It's so different than it used to be 20 years ago. So I'm going to give you a little history of this so you understand what's happening. In 2007, there was a book written called Flexibility, Architecture that Responds to Change. And it was a guy by the name of Cronenberg, and he had this big idea. Now I'm going to preface this with this. I don't think he talked to facility managers, but this architect had this big idea that my building, my architecture should be as flexible as nature. He figured that the built environment should be able to change to meet shifting needs no matter what it was. Well, that's a great concept. It's a great idea, but how do you do it in a building that was built in 1900 or even in 1980 or 2000? So our closest neighbor here in the U.S., Canada, had this new requirement in 2011. It was called Workplace 2.0 Mandatory Fit-Out Standards. Their goal was to consolidate space, shrink space, increase density. So this was a mandate. It was a mission in Canada. How do we do this? How do we create an economical model that gives us maximum return on investment, as you see on this slide? How do we get that? How do we have this flexibility? How do we make a space work the way employees and visitors want to work? And how do we get the best return on investment? So Canada in 2011 says we're going to do it. 5 years later, I was reading a report, and this is what it says. I'm quoting from them. How can we be going to various buildings and changing the furniture around and not ensuring that modern technology is available? There has been no integration of the workplace strategy with technology. And that becomes the issue. We see all this furniture with power in it and data in it, but it's being placed in somewhere in your building where there is no power, where there is no data. And so we're going to be looking at some of those things today. Traditionally, and most of you know this, but I'll review this quickly, we brought power and data to spaces by either core drilling, which is literally punching a hole in a concrete floor to run wires. And it was always used for these upper floors, because obviously at the slab grade on the main floor, we don't need to do this because we're going to run into dirt. Secondly, they did trenching, cutting into the floor, trenching to what we needed. Here's an example of core drilling. The problem with core drilling is it isn't cheap. It requires specialized equipment. If your CEO or your president says, hey, I need to change this office today, I need power over here, here, and here, and I need data, there's no way you can use core drilling to make that happen. But if it was a complete new build out, you could, but there's some of these things that happen, then there are some hidden costs even in core drilling. You can see this model, this picture of trenching, and this is pretty typical. If you have trenching throughout your ground floor, your slab, it's going to look like this, even though you might not have seen it yet. It's going to be cutting through the concrete, creating this grid pattern all over the floor so that where we bring power and where we bring data, hopefully, is where you want it to be. The hidden costs are this is very difficult to rework if we're off a foot or we're off 2 feet. which often happens when we're dealing with core drilling and trenching. So both of these situations that I just explained are typical, traditional, what happens all the time. They're disruptive, they're loud, they're dusty. You cannot do it in your occupied space. You're going to have to allocate resources to do it on the weekend or evening after hours. It makes a mess out of the place. It impacts the productivity because it's literally changing your building. You have to be careful of all the dust, the water, safety. But one of the worst things is you have to make sure that the tenant who is below you will sign off on your plan, because they are going to have the same dust containment, the same water protection that you require because of you drilling a hole into their space. Another issue we have with this traditionally is once that concrete is drilled, you don't undrill it. Oh, you can fill it in with concrete, you can fill it in with fire stop, but you just don't undrill that. And we have seen it so often where the core drill has been in the wrong place. I could tell you stories of several facilities who call us every week and say, can you help us? We just did this many core drills. We had one out in DC, they did 250 core drills and they all were off a couple of feet. So that process becomes very expensive. You can't move that core drill. Where when we're going to look at these raceway options in a second, you'll see, well, there's so much more flexibility with these that is built in that gives you freedom as a facility manager or an engineer or designer that doesn't cost you in the future. We had a space, our office, our company, ConnectRack, is headquartered in Dallas, Texas. And we have a large company you would all know in Fort Worth that did a new headquarters, bringing in about 5,000 new workers. And they called us about 2 months ago and said, hey, we core drilled our floor, but we're off. So can you come and help us? Obviously, we're here in Dallas or in Fort Worth. We can do that. But those are the issues that we're dealing with. The other one is the whole limited application. Depending on what the x-ray shows, the floor can only hold so many holes. They don't want to, you can't put it wherever you want it. Wherever you put an X on a blueprint, you cannot put that. If a president, CEO says, I want this power and data right here, the floor has some sort of cabling in it, some sort of steel in it, it cannot be done. The second thing that happens is they become very inflexible. They're like a boat anchor. It's like, this is where everything has to come from, is this little core drill or this trench. And I don't want it there, I want to move it. And so core drills are very limiting that way. So what happens is people often will say, well, I'm going to have to do a power pole. I don't like it. There's not a designer that I know of, and we deal with designers also and architects. There's not a designer I've ever talked to who says, I love power poles. They just don't like them. So how do raceways help? We'll look at this before we get to those actual applications, even though this is an actual raceway that I took a picture of in a facility I was at north of Seattle. They are a basic metal trough that can hold wires and cables. Sometimes it's pre-wired. Sometimes the electrical outlets are pre-wired in the data, and other times they allow you to put them right in there. It has a cover that can be removed, and because of electrical code, the wireway itself needs to be screwed into a concrete slab. There are different types of raceways. The one I just showed you before is very utilitarian. It sits right on top of the floor. Electrician gets it at his distributor. He can do that quickly. It goes right on top. It's not necessarily beautiful, but it's utilitarian. Then there are raceways like what you're seeing in this picture, which are really elegantly designed, and they're hidden under the carpet. You wouldn't even know they're there. And so there's a wide variety from something you see to something you don't see, something you feel, and something you don't feel. And that's raceways. Now, this is a product that I'm not going to talk about the specific product, but I love the drawing because it shows what a basic raceway is. If you see the numbers here, and I will walk through these numbers with us quickly, 4, 5, and 6 are all power options, so we won't necessarily talk about those. But it starts at a wall. A raceway has to start somewhere, at a column, at a wall where it's going to grab power. It's either going to go have a little hole, and it's going to go into the wall cavity, up into a junction box, or it will be on the surface mounted. If there's a concrete column, if there's maybe an old facility that has asbestos and you don't want to go inside it, you can do it as a surface mounted. So we're going to start at that hole or start at that wall. 2 on this picture has a wireway. That's our raceway coming down through the middle of what you see. And that's a raceway that runs either pre-wired power or it runs something that an electrician is going to place wires in. Then 3 is the transition ramps, because everything has to be ADA compliant. And so every system has some sort of either a built-in ramp in that wire trough, or it has a tapering system, and this system here is almost 3 feet wide, so it makes it unnoticeable. And then it comes to the power, and at number 4, you see there's a power option with actual outlets. Number 6 is actually a power option where it's hardwired into systems furniture, where they have their base in feed and it comes in. And so all of that can run in this wireway. Number 5 is simply a cap that covers it if you're not using it. Because I am not in front of you and I can't see you, I'm just going to keep moving, even though I would really, hopefully you have some questions on some of this. This is a graphic picture. It's a real photograph of that system that I just showed you. You can see that there is this raceway in the middle that has the wires there that is going to power the system. It has enough room for some data cables, and this system here that is being pictured actually has others that allow it to have as many data cables as you need. And then it has these moisture resistant transition ramps that are going off like this 3 feet, so you don't notice that it's sitting on top of your slab. And then if you go back to the snap-in receptacle module, that's what it looks like. It actually plugs into those hubs along the way, and it gives you this opportunity to have something completely covered by the carpet, very seamless. The profile is unnoticeable unless you're really paying attention. And that's how raceways can help bring you power and data in some of these spaces you're looking at. Here's an example of another one that has an exposed top cap, but you can see it's coming around the column. It allows, Raceway allows you to move them where you need them to be. This is one where the power was around the corner, and they snaked it around and put it right at the foot of that table, and no one even notices they're sitting on it. This one here is, again, that utilitarian one I showed you earlier. And this just shows that you can come at different angles if you want to. You can come straight in, and most manufacturers know which is the best way to go with their product, and they will help you so that it becomes as least noticeable as possible. I know that when our design team is working with people, and if it's something that is going to be on top of the floor, they recommend putting it in a low traffic area. And so there are teams that can do some of that for you too. What we're noticing is that in office spaces, there are some pretty common cabling needs because of the fact that everyone's bringing their devices with them. Everyone has a laptop they're carrying from one meeting to a next meeting, and they need to charge it. And so we're noticing that this power and data, and this is nothing new to you. So this is the environment you live in. These small huddle rooms, executive offices need it. Conference rooms need it. These little office pods that are portable need it. Open office layouts, rows of seating like training centers, call centers, classrooms. What we're noticing is that almost every space in a modern or modernized facility is requiring some sort of power or data. It's very rare in today's world that we are seeing designers create anything that doesn't have some sort of power. The other issue we had, and I showed it to you in the beginning, was these cabling issues. What do we do with cables and the cables that are exposed? This here actually is a live picture that I took, and it was in a court system where the witnesses walked over it, and it was transferring the data to a juror's box. And I said to the court system, does this still work? Oh yeah, it still works. Well, you and I both know it's not going to work for much longer, so they were actually replacing it with a raceway so they wouldn't have this issue. We've seen a lot of these things happen throughout Canada and the USA. Because of the fact of that we don't want cables damaged, we don't want them to be trip hazard, we want them to fit within the ADA requirements. This is a big part for these raceways, not just power, but this data that we have to put inside of them. So, what do? We need to specify raceways in an area. What do we do first? Well, we look at the primary use of the space. And again, different teams are different. ConnectRack happens to be a company that has a design team that will do this for you. But what's a primary use of the space? As you look at your desk, you look at your workstations, what else might I use it for in the future? How can I rearrange it in like 3 or 4 different ways? How can I put something in a raceway that's permanent, but what we call semi-permanent, because it can be removed, it can be reutilized in other spaces or even in the same space. And by having all this power and data in my space in an economical sort of way, how does that help my future tenants? How do I help create people who want to rent the space out when this client is done? So first thing to do is we want you to look at the specific Raceway products. And I won't cover them all here, but just to give you the concept, you saw the utilitarian one that sits right on top of the floor. The top picture here is showing one that has what I call mini towers. They're desk height power, and they plug into the system on the floor, and you can see those ridges that they have. It's only about 6 inches wide, but it becomes a little more noticeable because it's narrow. It's not like the one below it that has 3 feet wide, which you don't notice. It doesn't impact furniture. The one on top is a good system, but wherever you connect the raceways, you can see, if you look closely, there's a big round disc. Wherever you have something, you have to have that round disc. And some people like that, some people don't like it. I was in a large automobile manufacturer in their headquarters, and they were like, we just don't like stepping on these discs. So they removed it and went with more of a system like the bottom picture, where there's like the 3 feet wide, you don't have that disc. So we have to look at it though and say, where do we put this? If it's sitting on top, if it's sitting like this, where do we make it least noticeable? Where do we do it? All the ones that are available do meet ADA compliance, so that's really not an issue. Then the second thing you look at is, what about cable quantities? You can see this situation here. This is in LA. This actually had a multiple circuit system. They had 4 circuits running in this raceway that was pre-wired, as well as, I believe they had close to 16 Cat cables. So what are your requirements? Maybe no Cat cables, maybe an HDMI. maybe some speaker wires. And so the second thing, besides where is it going to be, what does the floor look like, that type of thing in the first image, what are you going to put in it? What do you have to have? And again, most companies should be able to help you with that and say, well, we can do it like this one, with the exposed top cap where there's a grommet where you pull it up through, or we can have it where you have termination at the ground level, at the raceway level, and then connect up from there. The advantage of specifying these raceways versus core drilling and trenching, you can see in this image here, again, a real picture that was taken. It can be last minute, and you say, you know what, we're gonna change this, or we're gonna add this collaborative area. How do I get power there? Well, using the traditional methods, you'd either have to have that power pole or core drilling and trenching, and you're not going to want to do that. You don't want to spend the money, nor the time, or the disruption to a new space like this. These, you can literally remove the carpet tiles where you're going to be working, literally screw down to the floor, tape any sort of ramps or transition that you have with it, and it's quickly done. I say this because I'm not an expert installer, but I was at a trade show a couple weeks ago in Galveston, Texas for architects, and we placed carpet tiles. We taped them down as you would in a normal install. We taped down, we didn't screw down, but we taped down the power and the data and the transition ramps like you would in a normal space. And it was only a 10 by 10 space, so it wasn't huge, but a 10 by 10 space is similar to a small conference room. And it took us about 20 minutes. So what happens in this element, it's relatively quickly. You still have to go up to the ceiling to a junction box to get power. But apart from that, the actual install is quick. So technology can be added wherever you need it, whenever you need it, no matter if you're late in the game or early in the game. If it's early, it's better for you and your team. But as facility managers, a lot of what you're trying to solve is last minute. So looking at some of the things we've already talked about, these, and you can read these things. How do we do this? How do we control the cables, reconfigure these spaces? How do we do all of this? I'm going to look at some tips that we have seen in actual environments. Tip number one is raceways work in tough environments. We hear this often. Does this hold up? Does this hold up? Pittsburgh Airport, International Airport, some of you might live around there or fly there, did a test. They took a raceway and ran it across 24 feet of their aisle right after the people mover. And they did it for 30 days on this trial to say, will this work? Will our golf carts, our carts that are hauling people, or will they notice them? Will the people trip over them? Will any of this happen? So after 30 days of testing it and not one person noticing it, they put it into their one of their gate areas, and they're going to do it on all of their gate areas, all of their 4 concourses that they have, and they use it with vinyl, luxury vinyl. They had carpet, and they're thrilled with it. We've had other airports do the same thing. So the question is, or the tip is, raceways work in tough environments. Does it work? Does it hold up? Absolutely. ConnectRec itself, and I can't speak to all the others, has a 1,000-pound load test on ours. The other section is to remember, the tip is raceways can be architecturally designed. This is in Vancouver, British Columbia, one of the most beautiful cities in North America. And this client had a couple of different things. He had 13 floors to do. And he had these rounded windows. It was angled. And he said, how am I going to do this and get power to my space? And it was an extremely fussy client. So as you can see, they put wire mold along the window wall. And from there, they cut a hole, put a transition adapter, and ran a raceway to their furniture, and with a junction box at the end of that raceway so they could power their system's furniture. And the client loved it. It was elegant. It was architecturally designed. It was beautiful. It fit with the theme of even the window wall. And below, they also had in every one of those floors several conference rooms. In the conference rooms, they chose to go with a complete under the carpet system. And you can see him sitting there, the guy with his body cut off. And that is a complete under carpet. They have all the power they need. They have all the data they need. They actually ran an empty raceway next to it under the carpet because it didn't cost them hardly anything. And they said, we're future proofing these meeting rooms in case we want to add something else. So they can be architecturally designed to meet any sort of design that your designer wants or your owner wants. Raceways also fix practical issues. We hear it all the time, and we can talk about libraries because we do a ton of them. Users bringing extension cords with them. Very dangerous. They need power. Everyone in a library needs power. There's not a person there that doesn't want to charge their phone, even if they're reading a book. And so they had this huge need for multiple workstations, computer labs, reader stations, and they wanted to eliminate the extension cords. They took an exposed top cap raceway system, and they had modular power, plug and play, and ran multiple circuits throughout the library at Leo Kane Library. Raceways also can handle the latest technology. One of the questions I get often, hey, how do I put my data in here? Will it interfere? I've got a great system, and will it interfere with it? Because raceways are required to have separation with the data cabling, there is not an issue. ConnectRack actually puts our power in a steel flexible conduit, so it can lay right next to it. We had a client, and it wasn't this one, Starlink, but it was another client who has the latest and greatest, most expensive Cisco systems and tons of conference rooms. And they said, we need to test this to make sure there is no interference. I said, please do. We would love to know. They tested it, their AV IT team, and said there is no interference. So they ran the cables right next to that shielded power that we have. So you can do that. Raceways can handle all the latest technology inside it, as well as you can see in this situation, you have a camera, you have monitors, you don't have wires. You eliminated those wires, and there's other ways that it can be done also by using raceways. What happens if you have an old building that you don't want to change? You can't cut into the floor, you don't want to wreck the walls. This is just to show you, and I won't elaborate too much on this, that raceways allow you to preserve this historic architecture, no matter where it is and what it is. The other thing that raceways can do is they can work from any direction. If you look closely in this picture, you'll see a raceway, an exposed top cap, coming from the back wall. Sometimes they come from the back wall, sometimes they come from the side and go under the desk that way. But they can go either way, because if you notice on the side where the raceways are not coming from, there's radiant heat. And so they couldn't go from that wall. Well, that is not a problem. They were able to go from the other wall. And so they were able to make this situation happen. This happens a lot where you need to save time on a project. This actual project in the University of Louisville was happened at Christmas time. They needed to replace everything. They needed to bring in around 24 circuits of power. They needed to run it throughout the auditorium, and they did not have time at that Christmas break to cut into the floor. So they used a floor-mounted system, raceway, that went along the whole floor. It went into the concrete you see, as well as into the carpet, and it brought all 24 circuits throughout the auditorium, and they saved a bunch of time. And this happens often with us, where the first time someone uses ConnectRack or another raceway, they'll say, I'm surprised by how much time I save. So if you do have a time crunch, I would encourage you to consider a raceway in your project. We had the largest building in Los Angeles, the tallest building at the time, Korean Air, and they were putting in a large electrical contractor, Rosendin Electric. It's like a $4 billion electrical contractor. They were putting in a floor or two of ConnectRack, and they had allocated so much time. After the project, I asked the project manager, who was full of smiles, he said, I saved 25% of time on my labor by using ConnectRack. I expected it to take as much time as normal with what we do, but I saved so much time. Another project we're working right now, Cinemark Theaters. They are putting us in so they can have the nice recliners. And they said, we have saved, and it was only a 10 theaters, 10 screens for this remodel they were doing. And they said, we are shocked how much time we saved. The electrician said, I saved over a week of time by putting in a raceway instead of cutting into the floor. The other side is to understand that raceways are durable. I was up along the Hudson, looked at the West Point Military Academy. They put it in 14 classrooms, a raceway that goes right on top of the floor. They have vinyl composition tile flooring, VCT, which we know is cheap and it's there. And they have salt, they have boots, they have military people who are not fussy about it. And those things are holding up amazingly well because these things are built super strong. And so raceways are extremely durable. The last thing I'm going to say is that raceways work in all spaces. Don't limit yourself. If you say, well, I don't know if this will work, call a manufacturer, call someone you know, call your electrical contractor, distributor, or someone like us who has a design team. This company here, based out of this place where this bridge is, some of you guys know this place on the West Coast, had 4 separate corporate campuses, and they utilize raceways to power everything. If you walk through the building, raceways power every piece of power or data that goes on in the building. And so you can blend it with your design, you can blend it with your high-tech needs. The key is raceways work in all spaces for you. Raceways, this is, I guess, my last slide. Sorry about that. Raceways, also future-proof space. If you're growing and you say, well, my office is going to change here in 6 months, what do I do? Your company says, we're doing this as a temporary, what do we do? Well, you consider raceways. This is an under-carpet raceway, but it's totally removable. It gives you that freedom to change it with hardly any work. And I could go story and story after this, but I think I've talked long enough for you guys to get the concept of raceways, why I'm passionate about them, why I think it's such a better option than cutting into your floor. We have a major customer in Manhattan who has moved their people from 30 floors into temporary spaces, and they put raceways to power all those temporary spaces. And when they build a new building, which is going to be twice as tall, they said, we're not going to put floor boxes in because we don't want to limit our next phase of life. They're going to consider raceways throughout their whole spaces. So raceways make it easy for you in the future, and it truly future-proofs your space. I'm going to turn this back over to Ann now.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. You could probably just leave your last slide on if you'd like, or we may want to toggle around if a question comes up that applies to a specific slide. So in any case, let's see. We do have some questions coming in, so we'll jump right in. We do have, and please continue to send in your questions. So Steve, I guess I'll start with the kind of the specification stage. And you did go into how to specify raceways and talked about the space use and if ADA compliance is an issue and, you know, of course, aesthetics and function and that sort of thing. And I did want to ask you a specific question about over carpet or over floor raceways versus the under carpet raceway option. Can you answer if there's any considerations as far as if you want to go an over floor or an under floor? Does it matter what type of flooring you're working with? You had mentioned in an airport, I think there was carpet there was vinyl tile. So does the type of flooring that is in an existing space come into play in terms of the under or over choice?
Sure. Great question. We often, our team will often ask, what do you have for flooring? Because it does determine whether a couple of things. For example, if you have an old broadloom carpet, you're probably not going to want to cut that open and place something in it. It may explode, it may disintegrate. If it's a newer one, you could. But so we asked some of those questions to see. And in that case, and I have an example of LA Water and Power, they did 6 different training rooms that had carpet already, but they put an over-the-floor raceway. It was actually a Connect Track Raceway over there because they didn't want to deal with the carpet. So some people feel that way because they either have an old carpet or they don't want to deal with a carpet, or it's going to be under a desk anyway. Ideally, most people that we have calling us and emailing want it under the carpet. So that's usually the people's first choice. And if a person has carpet tiles, it's extremely easy to do.
Okay, thank you. So then I will ask you about next about an installation question, and I'm sure that's something that's of interest to a number of attendees. So the question is, what I think you had mentioned electrical contractors at one point toward the end there. So the question is, what contractors or other service providers are necessary for a raceway installation? Electrician, of course, if they wanted to work with a company such as yours, Connect Track, would they go directly to you, or who's involved in that that process overall from the facility management standpoint?
Okay, if you need this installed, your facility team often, again, depending on the size of your company, can install everything because it's very simple to install. You will need a licensed electrician to bring the power in. So that part where we talked about at the wall, where you're going either up to a junction box or something like that, that will require an electrician. From that point on, it does not require an electrician. Everything is pre-wired power. It's all encased. It does not require that. Now, I say that, but some areas will require that. So depending on your area, maybe in Seattle, they're going to say an electrician has to do it all. If you're in Birmingham, Alabama, they're going to say, no, you don't have to. Anybody can do it. So it depends on your area. You'd want to check to see. But generally speaking, electrician is needed to bring the power in from the wall. Everything else can be done. We have carpet people that do it. We have furniture installers who do it. We have facility teams that do it. So whoever your favorite team is, I guess.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I'm going to follow on that question quickly, or your answer quickly, and ask about when you do have this in the facility already, and someone's gone with a raceway project, and they do want to reconfigure, which is obviously maybe one of the things they're thinking about when they put a raceway in. Who gets brought in to reconfigure? Is that something that you see facilities teams do in-house, or again, they bring in a contractor, or what's that next stage like?
Yes, we see all the above. It depends again on the size of the company and what those teams are like. But the facility team can redo it. They usually work with a company like ours and say, hey, I'm changing this. Can you give me a new layout? This is what I have. What products can I keep? What do I need to add to? Like that.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to shift gears. We had a question come in asking about a specific type of space, and that's an outdoor space. So the question is, as outdoor spaces become more popular to enhance facilities, do you have any thoughts on exterior applications for the raceway solution that are not only functional but aesthetically pleasing? So do you have any experience with that or thoughts on that looking ahead?
We do not have any outside applications. I would say, and we haven't brought this up yet, but our company, Connect Track, has just been acquired. We're now a Legrand company. Yes. And I'm not even, this has been just a couple of weeks, but Legrand has outdoor power. So I would suggest they look for something like that, but I'm not familiar with it. ConnectRack is going to continually be a corporate interior space product.
Okay. Okay. All right, great. So that's something that they can look to Legrand. Okay, got it. That's Legrand.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
So I'm gonna stay on that that application trends topic for a minute, and you went over a good number of real world projects there in your presentation. And if you want to refer back to any of those for this, that's great. But the question is, kind of thinking outside the box, what is one of the most interesting applications of your products you've seen? Whether from an innovative standpoint or just unusual. What's a project that you've seen in your work that stands out?
Really good question, because so many of them are cool. So many of them are based on what the designer has created. We just kind of come in and make it all work. So the one that I mentioned to you in the West Coast of the bridge, the vacation rental place, I would say that was one of the very intriguing spaces to work with and to walk into, and there are 4 different campuses, because of the creativity in their spaces. From their meeting rooms were all different. Their spaces where the people worked were all different, from having an Airstream in the middle of their office space as a conference room to just some really cool things. So it was more of that element that made it interesting, as well as the fact that we powered everything and gave data to everything. So those are the kind of things that we enjoy walking into, to see those designers not limited at all in their design, so they can go crazy.
Okay, thank you. And then I do want to ask you a technical question that had come in, to a degree a technical question, and I know you had shown a diagram of the ConnectRack, one of the ConnectRack Raceway products in the beginning, and the question is asking about capacity as far as the cabling within Raceways. What are is that a standard in terms of how many cables are in these Raceways, or is that something that's customized according to project? I know you had shown power cables and then data cables separated. So I guess I'm asking, what's the, is there a de facto standard, or is that by project need, or how does that work? What's inside there?
Yes, the different manufacturers handling it different, and there's not a lot out there as far as people doing this. Some have no data. The one that I showed you with the mini towers, the little more of a 6-inch bump, that one has no data. They cannot accept it. Others will accept 1 or 2 data. Our system will allow you to have as much as you need. I did a court system where we needed a podium. We needed 52 cat cables. I don't know where they're all going from, what they were doing, but they needed 52, and we were able to make that happen. So ours is the most robust as far as having as much as you need. There is no standard. The thing we have created is a conference room or some type of a collaborative space. We've put it where it can take 4 to 6 cables, because generally that covers an HDMI, it covers communication for a phone, it covers whatever they want in those spaces. And then we have other systems that allow us to add up, like say, 52 cables if you need it. But there is no actual standard.
Okay, thank you for that. So I guess we have time for one last question, and we talked about the technical aspect. So I guess I did want to ask you, from a trend standpoint, we did talk about some of the interesting applications, but from a trend standpoint, we understand flexibility and future-proofing is definitely, kind of something that plays into the choice if you wanted to go for a Raceway system. But are there any other specific trends that you're seeing in workplace and office design where Raceways are coming into play? Kind of anything, emerging, or something that's
sure.
Coming around the pike? You could talk about that. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing happen, and we've had people ask us for this for years, so it's been growing and growing and growing. As they're changing spaces, they want that one room to be a training room. They want it to be a collaborative area. They want it to be a party room. They want it to be a meeting room. They want it to have multiple functions. That's the biggest thing that we're seeing, is to maximize space. So how do I make this have more options and yet not have plugs in the floor? And so I will unveil today that ConnectTrack has a new product coming out in summer that allows these rooms to have as much power as they need, but when you want to change it, you literally go over there and you can pull up that receptacle module and tap it, so that space can be anything you want it. If I need 2 plugs over here, I'll go put 2 of them in. If I need 3 over here, I put them in. If I don't need them, I take them all up. And so the biggest trend that we see is using one space to do way more. And this new product, sorry to plug a new product, but the new product in summer is going to allow that. And that's literally the biggest trend that we see. So I appreciate it, and I really do appreciate you letting us present this. For those of you who stuck around and listened to us, if there's anything that we can do to help you, again, I think you have our contact information at connecttrack.com. You can get in touch with us. We'll answer any questions. I'm available, and I will talk to you about anything specific that you have beyond this that you didn't want to ask here. So thank you very much for participating today.
Yes, and thank you, Steve, and again to ConnectTrack for helping with the sponsorship of this webinar. So I want to thank our audience for the attendance and for your questions. And as you pointed out, Steve, I know you are available for follow-ups, and that's why I do want to point out to everyone on the call that with the email that you get from Facility Executive about the continuing education credits for this session, you will have included there Steve's email and contact information if you wanted to follow up directly with him. So that'll all be in that email. Additionally, a recording of the webinar will be available online at our website, facilityexecutive.com. And to learn further, of course, you can always visit connecttrack.com. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Steve, and have a great afternoon.
Yep. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.